Innocence, a word used to describe the purity and freedom of guilt and sin, a word whose meaning is often associated with childhood, a time in a person's life when we are most impressionable, sincere, and vulnerable. Throughout history, the concept of childhood innocence has been coveted by society, both for good and evil. Children are depicted as our future saviors who must be kept safe, but for some, used for personal gain. Childhood innocence holds tremendous meaning to how we see society. To this day, we strive to save innocence as a way to save our society. For if our future is in the hands of our children, then what society believes is important must be instilled into the next generation. However, innocence can be easily lost and stolen from a child. In our modern day, depending on where you are in the world, children's rights can be completely ignored. Through means of physical, mental, and emotional harm, this innocence can be taken by the wickedness of this world. And as these children grow into adulthood, these pains may never leave them, but rather be scars of the horrific moments in their lives that they have survived. These children are then led to carry on lifelong symptoms that are not only emotionally and physically draining, but also life-threatening. This leads me to talk about one of the darkest tales in gaming history. On tonight's episode of Character Analysis, we'll be diving into the story of Heather Mason and her descent into the horrific and disturbing past woven together in the town of Silent Hill. Heather Mason is the main protagonist in Silent Hill 3, and is the only child of Harry Mason from the original Silent Hill. She's a typical teenager of the early 2000s who enjoys hanging out places where her peers go, like the mall. She's a little rough around the edges, but is still genuine. She is smart yet vulnerable, as well as fair-minded yet understandably distrusting. Heather is like most young girls around her age. She's a young 17-year-old searching to find herself and her place in this world, while also fast approaching adulthood. What sets Heather apart from her peers is a dark and violent past that she can't fully remember or understand. Despite her troubles, Heather's been able to live a happy life with her father. Though their lives are modest, Harry loves Heather and does everything he can to provide and protect his only child. However, Heather was not Harry's first daughter. During the events of the first Silent Hill, Harry and his wife Jody found an abandoned infant on the side of the road. After which, they took in this baby and gave her a new life and name, Cheryl Mason. As Cheryl grew into a young child, Harry's wife would sadly pass away, and Cheryl would become the only person that mattered to him. Though constantly busy as a freelance writer, Harry tried his best to show love to Cheryl. From this love, Harry planned a vacation to a town that Cheryl randomly asked to visit, called Silent Hill. Cheryl had begun to experience an urge to visit the town even though she had no idea where it was. She just wanted to visit this place with her father. However, before arriving into the town, Harry sees a mysterious young girl suddenly walk in the middle of the street in front of their fast approaching vehicle. Harry, having no choice, slams his brakes, causing him to crash and lose consciousness. After waking, Harry sees Cheryl is missing from the car and frantically begins searching for her. As he sprints up to the mysterious town of Silent Hill, he sees the faint image of his daughter standing in the street. As he approaches her, Cheryl begins to run into the foggy streets. Harry begins calling out her name as she runs further and deeper into the dense fog. Unbeknownst to Harry, this is the last and final moment he would ever see his daughter face to face, thus beginning this dark tale of lost innocence. Cheryl fading away into the fog of Silent Hill is an example of how easily innocence can be lost right in front of our eyes. As Harry searches Silent Hill, he begins to uncover the dark truth of the town and its connection to Cheryl. It's during his journey that he learns of the horrific and tragic fate of another young girl by the name of Alessa Gillespie. Alessa Gillespie was a remarkable and unique child who showed supernatural abilities and whose life was used to fulfill a prophecy for a cult called the Order. This young girl would be subjected to immensely disturbing rituals that would break and scar her both physically and mentally. These atrocities would defile her, leaving her feeling empty, alone, and in incredible pain. These heinous acts on Alessa were enacted by this order to birth what they believed to be a god that would save the world from sin. However, Alessa's supernatural powers had abilities this order didn't fully understand. Alongside the strange powers of Silent Hill, Alessa could shape the world to her liking, make others experience the manifestation of her nightmares and fears. However, Alessa could do something even more remarkable. She could separate herself, or rather, what the game refers to as her innocent self, into a new being. This new being would be able to live beyond the horrors of her original life and have the chance of finding the happiness Alessa herself was robbed of. This other self would start life fresh as a new being, unharmed by the world. That new life was the infant that Harry and his wife had found years ago, Harry's now missing daughter, Cheryl. After learning all about what happened to Alessa and surviving the world she had created, Harry would realize that he was unsuccessful at saving Cheryl from the evils of this world. Cheryl's body was merged back with Alessa's once again, allowing this order to execute its objective of birthing a new god. However, Harry knew he had to stop this creature and decided to battle it to the death. Harry, with sheer luck, was able to kill this monster. As the world began to crumble around them, Alessa's body would reappear, handing him a new infant. With her last bit of strength, Alessa then opens a distant light that would allow Harry to leave this world of Silent Hill behind forever. The baby given to him was Heather. After finally escaping the twisted hell of Silent Hill, Harry carried a lot of hurt and anger for the child he lost and had even thought of killing this infant to prevent Alessa's powers from returning. However, this feeling didn't last long, as Harry knew this child deserved to live a happy life and would raise this child as his own in honor of Cheryl and Alessa. He would rename the baby after his daughter Cheryl, but would later change this name to Heather. This is because the Order was still active and was pursuing Harry and his new daughter. This eventually led Harry into killing one of the members in self-defense. With the law favoring Harry's side, he would change his daughter's name to Heather and would move away so far as to dye her hair blonde to help hide her true identity. Fast forward to Heather as a 17-year-old, she is once again found by the Order, and her life is ultimately changed forever. Heather begins to remember fragments of her past selves. It's during our time with Heather that we learn of a woman named Claudia. Claudia is a high priestess of the Order and was a friend of Alessa's. Like Alessa, Claudia also harbors bizarre and mysterious powers. Her sudden appearance in Heather's life is to birth the god that the Order attempted 17 years ago. How Claudia would do this is to consume Heather's heart and being with hatred. She does this by killing Heather's only family and loved one, her father, Harry. Heather eventually seeks revenge for what this Order has done and plans to kill Claudia. This is exactly what the Order wants: to consume Heather with hatred. This here is yet another example of a person's innocence being used for someone else's gain. This leads Heather to journey back to Silent Hill, the town that holds so much pain from her past lives and now her own. Heather would venture to places that her past life, Alessa Gillespie, would have had many horrible moments. Heather would remember small parts of these memories, but would eventually remember the final outcome of Alessa's life. Heather's life is nothing more than a tool and vessel for this order, just like Alessa's. She's meant to birth a god and to sacrifice her own life in the process. However, Heather is brave and knows that she's the only one that can end the suffering once and for all, and will go head to head with the entities of Silent Hill, the Order, and even her own self. In order to understand the meaning of Heather's character, we need to talk about certain topics that can be hard to cover. Throughout the game of Silent Hill 3, we see numerous references of sexual and voyeuristic settings that Heather is involuntarily involved in and must survive. These settings depict the fears that women experience throughout their entire lives. In the game, you constantly feel as if you're being watched by something that wants more than just Heather's life. Heather's sexuality and vulnerability are at the forefront of the game. Female forms are shown constrained or trapped, almost purposely presented to Heather. The feeling of being trapped is not just outwardly, but also internally. There are parts within the game where infants and fertility symbolism are used to remind Heather that something is growing inside of her without her consent. However, it's Heather learning about the life and fate of Alessa that makes these situations that more frightening to her. The Order did succeed in its goal to birth a god by merging Alessa and Cheryl. Before this, Alessa had already experienced extreme mistreatment and exploitation of her body and gender. This started when she was a young child and lasted into her teens. Her body during one specific ritual was accidentally caught on fire, causing extreme disfigurement and the beginning of the deterioration of her psyche. Alessa's body was left almost immobile and led for the Order to hide her away, locked in a room in the basement of a hospital where her wounds would never properly heal. It's here where I believe that Alessa's powers offered her a partial escape from this hell. When a young child experiences extreme traumatic events in their lives, they can potentially develop a mental disorder called disassociation. Disassociation is when the mind disconnects a person from the traumatic experiences they are living in. This can be in the form of memory loss of places, people, and even events. There are many forms of disassociation, but the one that I feel Alessa developed in her life is called dissociative identity disorder. This specific form of disassociation is when the mind creates two or more identities with their own names, memories, and distinct personalities called alters. An example of different alters can be seen from the artist Kim Noble, whose works tackle their own many different identities while having dissociative identity disorder. However, one of their alters by the name of Rhea Pratt has some of the darkest work I've seen in art, and shares some of the real-life trauma that Alessa would have suffered during her life. Rhea's paintings depict the ritual abuse of children in real life. Most of these images are quite disturbing, but the one that I feel safe showing you all is a painting called Daisy Chain. This painting shows the vulnerable capture of 3 children holding hands with their captors lurking over them. Above them are the same forms of the children, but almost ghostly replicas. This is the representation of disassociation, them separating themselves from the horrors that are about to take place. The 3 childlike forms remind me so much of Alessa, Cheryl, and Heather, connected and at the same time separated, tied together by their innocence, represented by the daisy chain lying near them. I believe that Alessa developed dissociative identity disorder in her early life and caused her mind to switch to other entities in order to cope with the abuse she experienced on a daily basis. These alters could be represented as the person Alessa wishes she was, someone who is free of her pain. As Alessa got older, I believe she realized her powers could manifest new beings, and it's here where Alessa separated her innocence and pure self into an altar, allowing them to escape her pain. This altar would be the child Harry and his wife found on the side of the road, aka Cheryl. The separation of her altar, the form of her innocence, was all Alessa could do to save herself. Heather, in a sense, is yet another altar of Alessa's, but has now become the true identity, or what I like to call the Omega. Omega can mean the extreme or final part of something. Heather is the last and final form of Alessa, and will make sure that the cycle is stopped for good. During her journey, Heather slowly begins to remember these past memories, and this could be explained by dissociative amnesia, a common symptom of dissociative identity disorder when a person will completely forget certain parts of their life, but can eventually remember them. The trauma of Heather's past lives has created a huge lapse in memory loss that she will eventually uncover. By the end of her journey, Heather remembers so much of her past selves and then must live with the knowledge of the hurt and cruelty Alessa and Cheryl had experienced. Heather must grapple with the knowledge that Alessa's last wish was for her to live happily. As the final form, is Heather able to live up to Alessa's wishes without filling herself up with hatred towards the world? I think people who struggle with extremely traumatic events in their lives in some way relate to this. Are we able to overcome our pain and live with happiness? I think it's a point that often gets missed when talking about the meanings of Silent Hill 3. Finding this answer to me is the main question of the story. Are we able to overcome our pain and live with happiness? During our time with Heather, we see references to the suppression and forced obedience that women have been constantly subjected to. Throughout history, women have been the largest and most suppressed and abused group of people across many times and places. Even though there were societies in the past that did redeem women with high honors, for the majority of history, women have been, and still are, the last to receive complete human rights. Throughout Silent Hill 3, we see Heather go through many locations that bring up certain fears women share. Fears such as SA, unwanted pregnancy, and murder. Monsters, locations, and religious ideologies often demonstrate these fears. One monster that disturbed me the most in Silent Hill 3 was Valtiel. This monster is constantly seen following Heather around in the game. He can be seen dragging women's bodies or hanging around in blood-soaked areas. Two examples of this are when Heather reaches the hospital and the church. During her time in the hospital, Heather will climb down a ladder and Valtiel will be turning a gear conveniently in a spot where he can look up Heather's skirt. This is also replicated back in the church near Alessa's old room. Here we see him again, only this time we see two young pair of legs dangling above him. This to me is a representation of Alessa and Cheryl and the horrific things they had gone through before their lives ended. Valtiel objectifying Heather and others' bodies is disturbing. The invasive objectification of women's bodies is more common than one may realize. In America, Child Protective Service agencies found strong evidence to indicate that 63,000 children a year are victims of SA. 1 in 9 girls under the age of 18 experience SA or assault at the hands of an adult. 34% of these victims are under the age of 12 years old. This is a sad and dark reality young girls face within our society. Heather in the game is 17 years old and lives somewhere within America. The age of consent can vary throughout the country, but the youngest here is 16 years old. This means that Heather is barely over the legal age of consent in some areas, yet is constantly being subjected to extreme amount of sexual scrutiny, as well as to comply with what the Order believes is her rightful duty as a prophesized woman. This is everything that Heather doesn't want. What Heather wants is revenge for what they did to her, to know why this is happening to her, and finally to uncover who she really is. Notice that anything revolving around what other people are seeking in the game is at Heather's expense. Her well-being and safety are barely a thought to anyone but you as the player. Heather only has herself to rely on. She knows that her choice and how her life is run is at risk, and that she must fight even harder to keep her freedom. This aspect of Heather's character really speaks volumes about the current affairs happening around the world to women, and how often these struggles are overlooked. Religion is the basis of why Alessa, Cheryl, and Heather are experiencing these horrific and inhumane treatments. Throughout history, organized religion has been used to suppress women to submissively obey God, the church, and men. Women who held power or knowledge were often accused of heresy or witchcraft. In the past, these women were executed in horrific and flamboyant ways to make other women fear and obey. Blind faith has led to countless lives lost, as well as the suppression of knowledge and the betterment of the human race. Women in such environments are forced to find safety as mothers and are expected to prepare their lives solely for this role. Heather in the game is constantly reminded that she will birth a god. However, Heather refuses to obey this and chooses what she will do with her body. This goes so far as Heather attempting to kill the creature living inside her. In the game, Heather is given a necklace from her father to protect her if he wasn't around. This Aglaophotis was used by Harry to help kill the premature god in the first game. Heather consumes this and, in a sense, aborts the creature within the chapel. This to me is a reference to women's rights to choose in regards to abortion, as well as the rights over her body. If Heather would have had this creature, she would have died and the world would have been thrown into chaos. Around the world, religious ideologies are used to keep women from having full rights over their bodies, and the rights they already have are constantly being threatened by these same entities. Heather stepping up to the church halls to deny the Order's plan and tells them that she doesn't believe in their god, to then killing their god right in front of them, is incredibly powerful and speaks volumes. The pain that the Order has caused many people is inexcusable. No amount of faith or prayer excuses it. Alessa and Cheryl had everything taken from them. Now Heather's life also hangs in the balance. Heather's ability to give birth is used against her. This leads us back to that feeling of being trapped even within your own body. Topics like these are incredibly hard and nuanced to talk about, but I think this is why Heather's character is so iconic. There are many layers to her and the topics surrounding her creation. That underlying fear of having no control over your own body is incredibly scary. Horror often uses this idea in a variety of ways. In Silent Hill 3, it's used in a deeply personal and invasive way. Heather's right to choose her life for some people would be up for debate, and that's truly scary. In our own world, life and death situations for women are on a political debate table, when in reality, women should always be protected and have a say in their own bodies and role in society. This to me makes Heather so important and why I love her so much as a character. Women should always have a say in how their lives are handled, and I think Heather represents this in an amazing and unexpected way. Heather Mason is a kind of character we may never see again in gaming. Her design and conception are deep with meaning. Along with her, you as the player feel just as out of place as she does. Silent Hill 3 is way more than just another survival horror game. It's not just a dark coming of age story about finding yourself and surviving your darkest fears. It's a tale of innocence being lost and struggling with that past. Heather also can represent our right to safety and freedom over our lives. These rights are ones that no others have authority to dictate, whether it's religious dogma or societal expectations. However, there is one final thing that Heather represents, and I believe it to be the most important. We can hear this when Heather is arriving back to Silent Hill. As the rain pours around the car, a somber song can be heard in the background. This song plays as Heather explains to the detective who she really is. This song is called Letter from the Lost Days. As they drive through the rainy night, Heather reveals to everyone that she knows who Alessa was and about her own past. She explains to the detective what happened to Alessa and how she's connected to her. All this begins to make sense for the story, but the song gives a deeper meaning to this moment. In the song, you can hear the following lyrics. A letter to my future self. Am I still happy yet again? Have I grown out pretty? Is Daddy still a good man? Am I still friends with Colleen? I'm sure that I'm still laughing. Aren't I? Hey there to my future self. If you forget how to smile, I have this to tell you. Remember it once in a while. 10 years ago, your past self prayed for your happiness. Please don't lose hope. Oh, what a pair, me and you. Put here to feel joy, nothing blue. Sad times and bad times, see them through. Soon we will know if it's for real, what we both feel. Though I can't know for sure how things work out for us, no matter how hard things get, you have to realize you weren't put on this earth to suffer and cry. We were made for being happy, so be happy, for me, for you. The song then ends with the final point in what I believe Heather truly represents. We were put here on this earth, put here to feel joy. This song is a representation of Alessa and Cheryl speaking to Heather. This song could have been a metaphor for when Heather began to remember her past selves, beginning around the age of 10 perhaps. They were asking Heather small points about herself while recanting things about their own lives. However, they are also telling Heather to hold on to hope for better days, to remember that she was meant to be happy. A lot of people fought so that Heather could live a life that was her own, away from the pain. Yes, it was inevitable that Heather would have to confront her demons, but that doesn't mean that she must succumb to the hatred as the Order wanted her to. Heather getting revenge doesn't erase the pain. Only through our will to move forward can we conquer those pains and begin to find peace and joy in our lives. This can be seen at the end of the game after Heather defeats the Order and reclaims the name Cheryl in honor of her father and her past selves with a rare and welcome smile. Silent Hill 3 is one of the most terrifying and complex games I have ever played. Its ability to showcase the fears that women face through the media of video games is unlike anything that has ever come out, especially during a time when games were being highly scrutinized. Silent Hill 3 also broke boundaries in ways that have not been done since in gaming. Heather's role in Silent Hill 3 is that of someone incredibly brave and who is a true survivor. Heather allows the player to also feel that great power for themselves. Heather shows the player to think and live for themselves despite the obstacles that may be in their way. We have the ability to survive our past regardless of how dark it may be. We have the power to find happiness and fulfillment far from our turmoil. Even though we may not know where our lives may take us, knowing ourselves and accepting our past will take us to the right place if we choose to keep moving forward. Like Heather, we must not be complacent. We have to fight our fears head on, regardless of how unbelievably painful they may be. For when we do fight our fears, we become the heroes our past selves needed. Just like Mary Elizabeth McGlynn sings, we were put here on this earth, put here to feel joy. And that is something always worth striving, fighting for. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like what you saw, please think about subscribing to my channel
Comment down below what Heather means to you as a player. This video was inspired by my own personal interpretation of Heather and what she means to me. She's very important. I would love to know what she means to you. Finally, I want to give a special thank you to all the people that have waited for a very long time for this video. This video was in production for about a year, primarily because the topics were very difficult to talk about for me, and I wanted to make sure that I did them justice. I appreciate all of you who made it to the end of this video. Till next time, I love you, mean it. Bye!